Hi there, my name is Becky Gouverneur. I am a professional charcoal animal artist, and I've been asked today to talk you through some of my materials. So I'm going to talk through 4 basic materials which I use in my work. They are all charcoal materials. When people think of charcoal, normally they think of great big expressive life drawings using charcoal, really messy and loose work. I work completely differently. All the materials that I work with you could use in that way, but also they can be used in a more refined way to create detailed, realistic work, which is what I specialise in. So I'm going to talk you through now what I use. The first thing I've got here is some charcoal powder. It's pre-ground. You can make your own by having a piece of sandpaper with a piece of charcoal and rub it all off, and then you've got this charcoal here that's left, and that you can use as charcoal powder. This is Willow Charcoal powder, and I apply it with brushes. The brushes that I use are very soft makeup brushes, but you could also use a watercolour brush. I put this on. This is the lightest tone of charcoal that I use. So if I put a base on here, you can sort of see the effect that you can get. Take a little bit off, you can get some really nice subtle tones with the charcoal powder, and it's great for doing fur textures or hair textures. Once you've got rid of a little bit more, so if you have scrap paper, you could start bringing some off the brush as well. You can get some really subtle tones. One of the great advantages of the charcoal powder is that you can create your base tones that you can then work into with your putty rubber. So putty rubbers here are really very similar to blue tack. It's a sticky material that you can form into all different shapes. So I quite often make it into this little pointy shape, and then if you drag it across your charcoal powder, you can start to create textures within that. And it's really nice and easy to make fur textures using that technique. And then you can build back in with your other types of charcoal and build up layers. So that's the first material that I wanted to talk you through. The next material that I'm going to speak about within charcoal range is willow charcoal. Most people will remember this from school. Normally you end up with really black hands from using it. What I always suggest to people is that before you start drawing with your charcoal, you get a piece of masking tape and you wrap it around the edge here, and that gives you a nice handle to hold on to. If you do have an extender, pencil extender or charcoal extender like this one, you can then pop that into the end and it will hold on to that charcoal, grip it a lot better than it would if you were just to put the charcoal stick in on its own. So this is just average normal willow charcoal that you would buy. This is a Coates variety, and it's just in a holder to keep your hands clean. When you apply it, you get a nice smooth texture that you can then use your brushes to blend out, or you can use blending stumps. One here that's a little cleaner. So blending stumps to blend out. What I would suggest avoiding, if you can at all manage it, is using your finger to blend out, because these tools you can see what is on them, you can clean them off. Yes, you can clean off your hands, but your hands is always going to have oil on it, and the oil which will get onto the page, and then once you start to work over that point where you've put your finger down and you can't see where it is, but you might have left a fingerprint on there, and you start to work in on your powder, you're going to get left with a beautiful fingerprint, and then everyone's going to be able to see exactly whose it is because they can trace you back through your fingerprints. So the willow charcoal can be used as sort of the next darker tone down from the powder. You can also take that out with the putty rubber quite easily. A little bit stronger if you're using an eraser, Tombow eraser. It's quite easy to erase that. and blending obviously with your brushes and such. If you need to get detailed fine points, so you can work in detail with the Willow Charcoal, even though it blunts very, very fast. Piece of sandpaper, rub it along. You can get yourself some charcoal powder as well, but you've also then got a nice point on here which you can use to create some finer lines, details, and whatever pattern you need to make. You've also got charcoal pencils. There's a range here. These are Derwent pencils. These are made of a similar material. It's got some kind of binding in it to keep it into a pencil form. So it's a little harder. They also tend to be slightly more gritty. So if I putting it onto the page, it's just a little bit more gritty. Just going to show you the 3 different ones. There's not a huge amount of difference in them. The darker one that I'm using at the moment, slightly rougher. And those also will blend out nicely with the brushes. And will erase with the putty rubber and with the Tombow. So they're very similar in tonal range and ability to blend. Next thing that I use is the Pied Noir pencils. These come in range all the way from H up to 3B. I'm using H and 2B today, and I will put a few lines of these onto the page for you. You can see that they're much darker than the other charcoal here. And also, one of the joys, especially of the H Pied Noir, is that once you've got a nice sharp point on there, it stays sharper for much longer than these. So you can create all sorts of nice fur textures. I'm going to put this one down here because I'm going to give this a bit of a blend in a minute. And you can see what that does. The darker of the two, so this is the 2B. It's even darker again. So blending the two together, and you can start to see a fur texture starting to appear there. So the Pied Noir blends more difficult than these. So if I blend out like I did with the others, you can see that it doesn't pull the material off the page quite as easily as it did with the charcoal. The 2B slightly more. But one of the advantages is when you are blending it, you can still see all of the detail underneath. So for fur textures, it's beautiful to do. You also need to bear in mind that when you are erasing, if you make a mistake or if you need to highlight an area, that a putty rubber is not going to touch it. In fact, neither really will the Tombow. It will lighten it, but it's going to be difficult to get rid of it entirely. You have to give it a good rub and it's still there. So the Pied Noir is sort of, you need to think of that as being a permanent material. You can lighten it, but erasing it, you're going to be a bit difficult. The last material that I've got in my little set today is, this is the unbroken new version. It's a Faber-Castell pit compressed charcoal. This is the darkest charcoal material that I have found to date. It's like drawing with midnight. It's brilliant. So I'll pop a bit of this down. And you can get nice, pure, high contrast blacks with that. Blending capacity is, it will blend out, but it's more difficult to control and it's really hard to erase. So if I go over there with a putty rubber, it does nothing other than make my putty rubber dirty. And with a Tombow, you can get a decent line out, but you're never going to get that pure white. You can put texture in and detail in from underneath. But yeah, to get those high contrast, high definition charcoal images, it is absolutely fabulous, this pit charcoal. Really lovely high contrast blacks. So charcoal is a really flexible, versatile medium. It can be used in a variety of different techniques. Blending is wonderful, far easier to blend with charcoal really than to do it with graphite in a lot of cases. And yeah, it's a very worthwhile material to use, and I hope you have great fun experimenting with it.